How do you find balance? How do you build sustainable habits you can maintain long term without completely derailing your progress when life gets chaotic? On today's show, we're talking about what to do when your routine gets disrupted. Things like vacation, holidays, or other schedule changes can really mess with your motivation, throwing you off track and making it tempting to just throw in the towel. But there are ways to build in flexibility so you can still enjoy yourself in the moment while minimizing the damage. We'll talk about planning for the unplanned, adjusting expectations, and directing your focus so you can stay consistent with your goals over the long haul.
But first, this is the Fit Mess, where together we learn to develop habits that help us live beyond our mental health struggles to create happier, healthier lives.
He's Zach. He lives in the future with his anxiety.
He's Jeremy, and he lives in the past with his depression. And we get together once a week in the present to share the obstacles we face and how we overcome them.
Thank you so much for being there. Zach is not here. He is still on vacation today. So we are joined again by my coach, my friend Joe Villegas. Joe, thanks so much for stepping in, sitting in Zach's chair. I'm sure he won't mind when he gets back. But for our audience who is not familiar with you, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on again. It is my pleasure. My name is Joe Villegas, longtime kind of strength nutrition coach. And I've worked with all kinds of folks. Like I said in the last episode, everything from stay-at-home parents to folks in the UFC getting ready to beat the crap out of people for a living. So been a lot of fun. Very blessed to have these opportunities, and very blessed to have this opportunity yet again to sit in Zach's chair and keep it warm for him.
Well, I appreciate you being there, and I appreciate you being here now, especially because I just went through one of these weekends where we had friends in town staying with us for a few days. And luckily, I had gotten in like all of my workout goals before they got here, so I didn't have to worry about like making up for one on a Saturday or something. I have my schedule pretty dialed in with this stuff.
Right.
So I got ahead of it, and I was like, good to go. They got here, and it was immediately like up super late, catching up, talking till 1, 2 in the morning, sleeping in. Then, of course, not the healthiest breakfast choices. Like, we did get in some hikes. We got some movement in during the days and stuff like that. But for the most part, most of the routines, most of the things that I use to hold myself up and keep depression at bay and feel healthy and feel strong and all the things, I mostly cast them aside for the sake of, like, spending time with my friends who I never get to see.
Yeah.
Worth it? Sure. Yeah. I love spending time with them. But I immediately felt the effects. Like within a couple of days, I found myself hitting a wall in the middle of the afternoon. My brain started playing tricks on me with like feeling a little depressed, feeling a little down. Mm-hmm. And it was so alarming how clear the difference was in my behavior and the outcome, where that was much more symbolic of the way I pretty much lived my life all the time prior to getting on this track of taking better care of myself.
Right.
And there's so many things like this, like supplements, different things you can do where you don't really notice the difference until you stop. Mm-hmm. This was that, right? I stopped and, oh man, I just felt awful. And I found myself going, I can't wait to get back to the routine so I can feel good again. So, I mean, I don't know really what the question here is that I have for you other than, is this common? Do you see a lot of people doing this where like everything's going great and the minute the thing comes off the tracks, it's just a mess?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I feel like, okay, here's my personal experience. Here's a page out of Joe's book, right? Is I have had trouble with this in the past where, like, if my wife and I go on vacation, by, like, the middle of the second or third day, I'm like, I gotta prep a meal. I gotta go do some push-ups. Right? And I have a hard time, like, letting go because I know what it feels like to not do those things after a while. And like you said, when you set those routines aside and you start to feel what the old lifestyle felt like, dude, you go running back to like, all right, I'm going to get up on time. I'm going to hydrate. I'm going to work out, which I think is important for folks every once in a while. I think it's important to experience that, right? Like we get caught up in our routine. Like, yeah, you might work out regularly and you eat well and all these things, but you can get even complacent doing that. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's something where it actually can be beneficial to experience what you've experienced because now you know what the opposite feels like and you don't want to go back to that. So it's almost like a little injection of motivation to get back into your routine and do your thing. So, for the context of what you dealt with overall, like how often do you see these friends? Like almost never, right? They probably didn't stay for terribly long. So you want to be present. You want to enjoy the moment, enjoy the time. Give yourself a little bit of grace. But you know full well, the second they start driving away, you're like, I'm back to Jeremy world. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing my thing now, for sure.
Yeah. No, and it's so easy to lose the self-compassion piece of that, where in the past, anyways, I know that had I done the same thing, I would spend the first week they're gone beating myself up for what a failure I was for not being able to stick to my promises to myself. I can't believe I did that. I'm such a loser, like all this stuff. But like you said, like they left, I look at the calendar and went, when's the next time I can get to the gym? Like, let's drink a ton of water. Let's flush out the system. Like, let's get things back on track. Because I just felt miserable. I know Zach's been going through this. He, a couple months ago, traveled. He's been sick for like 3 months and hasn't been able to go to the gym, hasn't been able to do the things. So much of our conversation has been how depressed he is, how lethargic he feels, how miserable he is because he's not doing these things. Yeah. But I'm also curious, like, do you see people become too dependent, like, to like when the routine falls apart, it's like almost catastrophic for them?
Yeah, for sure. And that can be tough, right? Like, you've got to have a degree of flexibility, right? In my opinion, like, I mean, even some variety in your life is important, right? You can't, like, I only know of maybe legitimately in the 12 years I've been coaching people, I've maybe had definitely 2, maybe 3 clients total, like, ever. This is like, I mean, I haven't coached a million people, but like easily over 1,000 people that I've like, you know, worked with in some way or another or more. Yeah. Who like legitimately live that lifestyle of like at 8 a.m. I do this, at 9:05 I do that. And like they're very type A and they basically put themselves in a bubble and that's how they do it. But that's how they're wired. Like they're just wired that way, right? For other folks, like, and I think a lot of like the downfall in some of the motivation we spoke about in the last episode, which if you're listening now and you haven't, go check out that episode because it was dope. We heard from the P90X man himself. You know, it's a recording anyway. But the point is like, I think it's important to build in some flexibility to your plan and to your program so that psychologically, when these things pop up, you're prepared for it. Okay. So like an example would be, and this is what I do with folks that I work with when we focus on nutrition, generally speaking, is they've got a plan A, we discuss a plan B, and we discuss a plan C. So like if all goes to shit, they have other things to fall back on. So mentally, they feel like they're still on task. They feel like they're still on the plan. And they don't just like hit the rumble strip driving and then just like go off into a ditch. You know, they can hit it and just kind of get back in the lines, which is what you would do in real life. So, and the examples would be like a plan A is like the ideal scenario. Okay. Like you've weighed and measured your food. It's portioned. You have it with you on time. You heat it up, you eat it. That's like the best case scenario, right? Plan B would be like, I can't control all my prep, but I can at least control what I'm putting in my mouth. Like I'm going to focus on single ingredient whole foods, like lean meats, vegetables, fruits, etc. Plan C would be like, I'm stuck at a kid's birthday party and I'm surrounded by sheet cake and pizza and I don't know what to do with my life, right? Like what do I do? In that case, we focus on more, well, you know, sometimes you find yourself like that, but who knows? But in those scenarios, you focus more on like mindful practices, right? Like, hey, I'm just going to eat slow. I'm going to have like one piece of pizza, eat it really slow and feel myself getting fuller sooner. So I don't like, you know, wake up covered in cake, you know, in a ditch somewhere. I don't want to do that. So when we have those kind of plans in place, it's like, yes, you have a plan, but it's almost like built in flexibility, right? It's kind of having a plan ahead of time before you experience those things. So in your case, like, let's say your friends are going to come back in the summer, right? And you kind of know what to expect. You can begin to plan ahead a little bit and say, okay, I know like we're always going to have dinner together and breakfast together, but during the day is variable. So maybe you can like, you know, plan lunches a bit better and hold on to a couple things in your routine, but like let go of some other stuff, right? Like for me, every summer my family goes to Long Beach Island for a whole week. My whole mom's side. And it's like craziness. Like my cousins are all grown and like rowdy and it's a ton of fun. And I know like there's certain food that's going to be there that I love and I only have it that one time a year. It's like I don't eat a jelly donut all year, but down at that beach, I'll have like one every morning. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like 3 days of the, you know what I mean? It's not a whole week that I only go for a few days.
Yeah.
But it's like 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to beat myself up over a few days. I'm going to have like a pork roll, egg and cheese, not Taylor ham, pork roll, egg and cheese sandwich for breakfast. Like, I'm going to have those things because it's kind of like what comes with the package of that experience, right? And I'm not going to give myself a hard time, but I'm planning for that. And I know that the bulk of the rest of the year, I'm pretty dialed in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This occurred to me. This happened last summer. And I know we're talking about this in February, but, and actually people are hearing this in March. So anyways, this came to me the other day. I was thinking about the fact that, summer vacation for my kids is right around the corner. Mm-hmm. Last year, I started my year strong. I was going to the gym every day, doing all the things. When the kids were home, I did not have a plan. To me, I was like, I'm still going to go to work. I'm still going to go to the gym. I'm going to do all the things. Meanwhile, there are little tornadoes running around me. I'm like, oh my God, I can't, how do I fit this in now? Yeah. And it took me all summer to figure out I really never had a plan, and it completely derailed everything. Yep. And so I'm trying to be much more thoughtful, even now, months ahead, going, how am I going to do this differently? What is that going to look like? Meanwhile, like as people are hearing this episode, I'm on vacation, right? We scheduled this. We recorded this a few weeks ago. It's finally being published and heard. But I'm probably somewhere in Italy right now. Like I'm eating amazing food, like just living the life. Probably haven't gone to the gym in days. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I need to go into it with some level of what's realistic. We're going to be on planes constantly. We're going to be traveling constantly, on the road, working, doing all these things. There has to be some level of balance here where enjoy it, experience what there is to experience, but don't let yourself so far off the hook that you're now, needing to crawl into a dark room because you're so depressed and miserable about how awful you feel that, you can't enjoy what you came here to enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like there's a balance to it. So like when my wife and I go on vacation, right before we had our son, like we know that we like to go out to dinner. That's what we like. Like that's part of that experience of vacation. We like to try restaurants and like we want to go and like split an app and get entrees and a glass of wine. Like that's our big meal for the day. So like when we travel, I'm not like, oh, I got to have 50 grams of protein every 3 hours. I set that aside. Usually breakfast, we get something quick. Like this is actually literally what we do is we'll get something like on the road for breakfast. We usually, it sounds silly, we'll just buy a loaf of bread and like PB&J at our Airbnb and just make a couple sandwiches. Yeah. And then we go out to dinner. And like, that's just what we do. And so what I'm focused on is like generally my total calories for the day, not like macros and timing and all this stuff. It's like, let's, loosen the grasp, so to speak, a little bit, like enjoy my life. It's all good. But when I do that and I know that's my approach going in, I feel successful because I'm following my like updated vacation plan. You know what I mean? Versus like, you're trying to follow your home plan where you're in like the perfect environment and you spent months or years like massaging this thing to fit your home life. Well, you're not at home. You're not in that environment. So you got to adapt to the new environment. And like for God's sake, like if you're in Italy, like how often do you get to do that? You know what I mean? Like you don't have to like go.
Apparently every 47 years.
Yeah. You might do it twice, but like, that's something where like, you don't need to go like totally off your rocker, but like enjoy the experience. And to me, like there's 365 days in a year, like you can have like 30 to 50 of those where like you just kind of fuck off. You know what I mean? And like, it's not going to like derail your progress.
Yeah. The only part where I need to be careful, and this is still just, I think, a matter of experimenting and learning my limits is I know I just this last weekend was such a glaring example of what I put in my body drastically changed the way it functioned. Mm-hmm. So there is a level of enjoy, balance, and things like that. But I also know if I'm not putting the right things in, I'm not only going to feel kind of crappy, like I'm going to get depressed. Like it's going to take over and it's going to shut me down and it's going to make me a miserable son of a bitch to be around. So I need to be really careful about like, yes, enjoy, but figure out where that line is between enjoy and you went too far and now it's going to take days to recover and you need all this quiet alone time to crawl back out of the cave. That's a tricky thing that I don't know that I ever really knew until really the last year of getting these things dialed in. I got a little depressed on Saturday after eating like crap and not taking care of myself for a few days. That is the most depressed I have been since the end of last summer, which is like the longest stretch I think I've ever gone without some sort of a depressive episode. So it became incredibly clear and apparent to me that what I'm putting in my body plays a big part in what's going on between my ears and the stories I tell myself about who I am. So that's a lesson that I'm still trying to figure out, like, where is that line for me?
When you say that, do you mean like you ate certain things and they made you feel that way, or you ate certain things at quantity and you were so full that you felt that way? Like what do you mean when you say that?
I don't think I didn't eat like excessively, but it was the things that I ate. Like normally I am very, like you were talking about protein every 3 hours, whatever. Like everything I try to eat, I try to at least lead it with protein or have it be protein heavy. And I only eat like 2 or 3 times a day. And so in this case, people were here. So there was snacks out on the counter all the time.
Yep.
Lots of kids. So lots of, chips and, snacks and things that were just sort of around. Yep. So just sort of that grazing of like, when you walk by, you grab a chip. When you walk by, you grab a cookie. Like it's it was sort of that constant, influx of foods that I don't normally eat. That was like the major change, because like I said, we went for a hike one day. We did a nice long walk. And I'm talking 4 days. So it was like the physical activity part wasn't that much different than what I normally do. But what I ate was drastically different than what I normally do. And that is the only change that I saw compared to what I normally do. And that, I think, is what started to bring on this episode that I was able to crawl myself out of. But it was very clear to me that played a huge part.
Yeah, for sure. So it is very challenging when there is like no friction between you and this like crappy food, right? And by friction, I mean there's no like distance, right? Like when you and I have talked about this concept before, where like if you are somebody who's like, hey, I come home from work and I'm tired and I end up eating a whole pint of Ben and Jerry's, because we all know that's one serving, right? And I get stuck in that like that loop. It's because there's no friction between you and that thing. And the idea is you want to create a lot of friction between you and the things you shouldn't have, and very little to no friction between the things that you know serve you well. So, for instance, if I like creating friction, let's say from ice cream, if I don't keep ice cream in the house and I want it, then I have to like put pants on and go to my car. It's cold.
That's the worst. If I have to put my pants on for something, forget it. Game over.
Breaker.
I'm not doing it.
I will never get ice cream again. But like then I got to get in my car. I got to go buy it. I got to pay the dude money. I got like it's a thing. It becomes an ordeal just to get it. It's a lot of friction. Where if I have a bowl on the counter with like apples in it, I can just go grab an apple and I'm good to go. So the next time, like let's say in this scenario, you have these people over, try and have both snacks out. So at the very least, you get a visual cue of like, okay, I know this bad food, is going to make me feel horrendous, and I don't want that because that sucks, and I don't even know where that rabbit hole is going to go, potentially. But I know that if I have this thing and there's no friction, it's right in front of me, I can still reach and snack on something and have the sensation I'm getting to eat, but I'm eating something that I know is going to serve me and what I'm doing. And like, if your friends are good friends, like if they really care about you, they're going to give you shit, right? Like any good friend is going to bust your balls because they should. Like they're supposed to. That's why
that apple looks delicious, Jeremy. How's that going over there eating that apple?
Yeah, nice job, nerd. Like they're going to give you a hard time. Just like I would playfully, because I've got to coach you. But the point is like it's going to come up, right? You might get a little pressure, or like haha, whatever. But at the end of the day, like if you can stop yourself for a second, like take a breath and say, okay, what is life going to look like in 24 or 48 hours, a week from now, if I keep doing, like, indulging in this particular food I know is not serving me? And like, I would challenge you to get very associated with that feeling, which I know is not something you want to do when it's depression based. Yeah. But when you say, okay, if you put yourself in that moment of like, dude, what does that feel like? And you're like, holy shit, it doesn't feel good. The likelihood you're going to reach for that versus the fruit you put out is way lower, and you'll go for the better option, right? So that's like in this context that we're talking about, that's like one way you could handle it. Now on vacation, that's another thing, right? Like I talked about, my wife and I focus on dinners, and we increase the friction on the other two meals of like reaching for crappy stuff because we know dinner is going to be like more indulgent. Do I sit down and say to my wife, like, hey, honey, we're going to create friction? Like, I don't know. I don't do that because she'd probably not be around anymore. But like, I set us up to win. You know what I mean? Like in one way or another. So that's kind of the point I want to put across. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the same thing that gets me into the gym every day and has me doing what I do all the other days, is there just has to be a certain level of discipline, and there has to be enough compassion for the situation to realize I don't need as much discipline for these next few days because it's not going to completely change all the work I've already done. I'm not going to completely undo everything in 2 weeks or 3 days or 5 days, whatever that short period of time is. So little compassion, little planning. It all applies to every aspect of your life. Give yourself a little compassion, have a plan, have a purpose, have a little accountability, and go for it, right? Like it just depends on the situation and varies depending on what's going on in that particular time.
Right. And I think some of it too, the last point I'll make is like where you set your focus, right? Like when you're at a party and there's food out and it looks yummy or whatever, like a lot of us fall into that sort of like FOMO, like, oh, like, they have jalapeno poppers. Like if I don't have them now, I can't have them later. But like we are some of the first generations, literally in human history, that have food certainty. You know what I mean? Like my grandparents, great grandparents had to ration food back in the day, right? Like I don't need to do that now. I can literally walk to a convenience store from my house and get pretty much anything I want if I really wanted to, right? So like, it's not that you're going to miss out. Like those foods are, at least, you know, here in America, right, are abundantly available. You can get to them if you wanted to. So like no worries there. Right. But I think a lot of it too is like understand, like you said, like give yourself a little bit of grace, like, and point your focus at what really matters in that time. If it's vacation or like you said with your friends, like why are you focused on junk food in the first place? Like, why don't you focus on the conversation you're having with these amazing people who you never get to see? And like, indulge in that, ask them how they're doing, like dig into like what's going on in their life and get outside of yourself a little bit. And I think you'll find the next thing you know, you're in a different room talking about something else away from the food in the first place. You know what I mean? It's like, try and direct your focus on things that really matter. And I think it'll better serve you. Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. I know you would give advice and get advice like this from your guests on your show. Tell us about where we can find out more about you, Joe. Yeah, for sure. If you want to check out my website, it's resultswithjoe.com. I've got kind of a bunch of free stuff on there you can check out. And also, too, any social media platform is Results with Joe as well. And hopefully, you guys come check it out, take a look. And it was a pleasure having me on the show, dude. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thanks for doing this. But also, you have a brand new online community you just launched. I do. Yes, I do on the school platform. So if you want to check that out, you can go to my website. The links, they all go right there. Or any of the social platforms I'm on, like the link in bio stuff, it all just drives right to that community. It's super cool. Basically building it up to be something where people have videos of me like teaching them how to do all this kind of stuff that we're talking about and more. They get support from me to answer questions. I'm actually going to start scheduling kind of live calls they can just tune into and ask questions and get coaching as well. So if you're checking this out, you want to check it out. It's on the school community. The group's called Get Lean and Stay Strong. Or you can go to any of the Results with Joe socials or my website at resultswithjoe.com and get it there. And all of that will be in the show notes for this episode at thefitmess.com. And by the way, if you've gotten any value out of this conversation, please do share this with somebody who could benefit from it. Just hit that share button today. Help us accomplish our goal of reaching as many people and helping them as possible. You're the key to doing that. So hit that share button and come back next week to thefitmess.com. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening.
We know this podcast is amazing and it doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.